Hello, my name is Matthew Clear, and I'm the Director of Traditional Worship, Music, and the Arts at First Presbyterian Church in St. Petersburg, Florida. I am extremely grateful to all of those at Voices United for organizing this online event and for inviting me to speak to all of you here online. This session involves investigating the concert series at our houses of worship and how we can either develop them or make them even more accessible to those in our congregations and our community. I'm excited to dive into a lot of different topics, including investigating the research of this topic, sharing what we do here at our church, at First Presbyterian Church, and discussing the future of our concert series and using some driving questions to really investigate this topic. Right now, I'd like to share those 4 questions with you, and then I'd like to give you a chance to go ahead and reflect about your own house of worship and how you might either begin a concert series at your house of worship or how you might continue and develop your concert series that already exists. Here are those 4 questions. How can music extend the reach of my church in the community? What kinds of music does my congregation appreciate, and how can I expand on these interests through organized performance? Number 3, musically speaking, what does my church and community need? What's missing? What is my church's musical niche? And number 4, who are the musical stakeholders in my church and community? Who are the people that participate in and fund music programming? I'll give you about 15 seconds, and if you need more time, you can go ahead and pause this video and then begin again whenever you're ready to think more about the answers to those questions. Now that you've had a minute to think about and reflect on your own program at your own house of worship, I want to take a minute to review some of the literature that's applicable to concert series and the planning of concert series as well. One piece of literature is titled In Defense of the Familiar: Understanding Conservatism in Concert Selection Amongst Classical Music Audiences. This survey dealt with the folks who purchased tickets for local regional orchestras. They surveyed the folks who purchased the tickets based on what kind of music they like to listen to and what sorts of pieces are familiar to them. What they found is that we like what we know. A second piece of literature is the impact of an interdisciplinary concert series on stress and work-life balance in a dental college. I thought that this was incredibly interesting because we don't study the medical profession very often. And to see stress reduction for medical students in a dental college through a concert series is fascinating. And indeed, that's what the survey in this study found. Satisfaction and motivation of attending the summer concert series at Mount Hermon, California. This is a study that's practical and not unlike what we're talking about today. They look at a specific concert series and see what's working and not working in that concert series. Stop Reinventing the Wheel: A Guide to What We Already Know About Developing Audiences for Classical Music. This is a really wonderful data-driven study that's based on what kinds of music our audience likes to listen to, and also wonderful foresight on what the audience wants to hear, and the idea that without an audience, we are essentially performing to an empty room. And so we have to consider them in every decision that we make and in everything we do with our ensembles. Finally, there are so many ACDA articles through the Choral Journal that I highly recommend. Too many to list here, but I would say that there are some about traditional concert programming, creative concert programming, and certainly hosting concerts of your own, all of the nuts and bolts with regard to doing those sorts of activities. So that takes us to answering the questions that I asked you, but doing so for where I work. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about our house of worship, about our church, and I'll give you some demographics, and I'll also talk a little bit about how we overcome some challenges in our concert series. First, the question, how can music extend the reach of our church into the community, is an interesting question. Most of our outreach begins by inviting people in. And so what we do is we host a lot of different school groups, high school and college. We also ask folks to come in from the community, lots of different community groups and singers, and we have them join us for self-produced concerts, as well as bringing in choirs who are community choruses in the local Tampa Bay area. Doing so generates a buzz in our community. It means that people in our community talk when they're at the orchestra concert about another concert that they attended at First Presbyterian Church. And I hear a lot of stories about how, well, so-and-so performed here, and you might consider having this group of people in. And so there's sort of a buzz and a conversation in our community that allows folks to come in, feel comfortable, and to know all the other performances that are going on. Question number 2, what kinds of music does my congregation appreciate, and how can I expand on these interests through organized performances? In our congregation, we have a lot of subscribers to the local orchestra and to other concert series. So I try to diversify what we do in our concert series and make it interesting or different from what's already going on other places. I'll give you some examples of that in just a minute. Question number 3, musically speaking, what does my church and community need? What's missing? What is my church's musical niche? For us, we like vibrant musical experiences. The people in our church are always saying, let's not do things that are quote-unquote sad, but let's do things that are exciting and happy and use lots of people on stage. So we try to do that, as well as varying different recitals and different concerts that we give. And I think that in terms of our niche, we're looking at traditional concerts, but with a twist, something that makes them interesting and something that makes them accessible to folks who are coming in from the community. Finally, who are the musical stakeholders in my church? Well, I identify those people as individuals. So I try to think of them as people who are interested in music, but not necessarily participating in music. The other group of stakeholders for us at our church are the people who do participate in our ensembles. Many of them give, but some of them give of their time. And so I try to remember that because they're giving of themselves, I like to give them a sense of an input on the music that we do and the people that we host in our sanctuary. The next thing I want to do is look at a description of our church demographic, because I think that'll help you understand who we are and what we do just a little bit better. We're located in St. Petersburg, Florida, which is Pinellas County, and that's a peninsula on a peninsula of the state of Florida. What that means for us is that we're a vacation destination, and that many of the folks that visit our church and are members of our church are snowbirds. And so we have our concert series planned usually through September, and it goes all the way through until April or May of the next year. So we usually have a time of special music and a time of not a whole lot of choral things going on throughout the summer months. So that's something to keep in mind about the seasonality of your church. Another thing that's interesting about our church is that we are Presbyterian. We're governed by the Diocese of the Presbytery of Tampa Bay. And so they like to make sure that we're using committees. And so one of the things that I do is I think about running all the things that I do through our music and worship committee so that they know the decisions I'm making and they can give their input as well. That communication has been vital in so many different circumstances, and those of you who have committees at your church, I'm sure understand that as well. The city of St. Petersburg itself is a growing area, and it's beautiful here. We have a vibrant community and a vibrant arts community as well, with so many museums and orchestras and choral ensembles. And so rather than feeling like we're in competition with those concert series, I like to invite those folks in and see how we can collaborate and share concert members and audiences. Another thing about our church is that we have four primary ensembles. We have a chancel choir of about 30 to 35 people who participate in our in-house ensemble concerts. We also have a chamber ensemble, a choir made up of 8 members. We also have a bell choir of about 7 people, and a contemporary ensemble of about 7 members as well. The acoustical space at our church is beautiful. We have a sanctuary that's that has about 4 seconds of delay, and so we use to maximize that space as well. We have a wonderful organ in our church that we try to maximize. We have lovers of organ music in our congregation, so we try to program at least one organ concert a year to showcase that beautiful instrument. So let's go to the concerts that we host at our church. There are 2 self-produced concerts that we have in addition to all of the folks that we invite into our sanctuary. These self-produced concerts are annual concerts, and we find that they're well attended because folks expect them year after year. The first self-produced concert that we have each year is called The Many Moods of Christmas. And if that title rings a bell, it's because it is based on the Shaw Bennett Many Moods of Christmas suite of 4 different suites for chorus and orchestra. Most years we try to do that choral orchestral suite as part of the Many Moods of Christmas concert. We also invite in a local group of students to perform both orchestrally and chorally with us, as well as inviting in different community singers and different community organizations to join us as well. Here's a look and listen of a recent Many Moods of Christmas concert. Now that you've heard a brief clip of a Many Moods of Christmas concert, you can see that obviously there's a lot of in-house logistics that go into that, as well as programming, lots of creative programming that we do to make sure that everyone in our audience feels like they have something to listen to and something to really know and something that resonates with them in each of those concerts. The second concert that we do annually that is produced in-house is called the Festival of Praise. This year will be our 35th annual Festival of Praise concert. It was conceived originally to sort of celebrate the folks who had gone on before us over the past year. And so those folks' names were read, and we had in a guest clinician every year who came in and conducted our choir, as well as community singers. Some of those names, and these names whenever I first got to our church really surprised me. Names like Diane Bish, Sir David Wilcox, Mac Wilberg, choral giants that would come in and work with our singers. We still do the same thing, but now we've changed the model of this concert to incorporate a guest choir as well. So when we host a guest clinician, we ask them to also bring their choir. So far, that has gone really well as a new model for us, and it's bolstered what the singers in our own congregation can do. This past year in 2020, right before the pandemic happened, we were fortunate enough to host the Festival Singers of Florida under the direction of Dr. Kevin Fenton from Florida State University. We also hosted another clinician who was our composer in residence for that experience, Jake Runnestead. And so we had the huge benefit of having all of those people here in-house for that concert. Here's a brief clip from that concert. As our in-house concerts change over the years, we try to adapt to what we're able to do as a church, but also what the folks in our community and congregation want to hear. And so far, those changes have been very, very successful. In addition to our annual in-house concerts, we always have guest musicians that come in from the months of September to May. Some of those folks are organists. We've had brass ensembles, local choruses, college choirs, guitar ensembles, and also this year we're featuring a concert of period instruments from the Baroque time period. And so we're really excited to feature a diverse range of different performers and ensembles in addition to the in-house concerts. The logistics for these concerts vary from concert to concert, and we could probably do a presentation just on concert logistics. As you all well know, concertizing is part of what we do for a living. And so I'm not going to describe what we might always do for each and every single concert, but I will talk about just a few logistical concerns in our concert series here at our church. The first thing that's interesting to consider is generating programs. You might want to think about, if you're having a group come into your sanctuary, do you want to be the folks that generate the programs to advertise certain things going on at your church, or do you want them to bring in their own programs? Pros and cons of that might be printing costs, but also having the ability to control the message of the concert series. For the most part, we print our own programs. And so when we do that, it allows us to print the way that we like to, using the editing that we can do in-house. Another interesting concern is the technical needs of the folks coming in to your house of worship. Do they need microphones? Do they need PowerPoint screens? Do they need mixed media for what it is that they're doing? We have our tech people available, but we try to not use them if they only need a speaking microphone. So that might be something to consider, and does that impact your budget? A third logistical concern is negotiating contracts. And there are some wonderful articles in the ACDA Choral Journal about that. But what I like to do at our church is I have a contract for each and every performer that comes in. And it's not so much an official document as it is a simple Word document. It allows us to agree on when the guest performer will use the space, but also the things that we will provide for them and the things that they will provide for us, and at what time and date. It's really a simple Word document, so I'm not going to put it on the screen, but it is something that I think is important. Oftentimes when we have professional ensembles come in, there will be an official contract that they send us, and we'll always have our folks on committee here at the church look over those contracts. A fourth concern for logistics is the facilities costs. Does it cost to run air conditioning at your church or heating at your church? And if so, does the concert series need to cover those costs, or will your church? And so these logistics run into then the budgeting concerns. And I like to think about the fundraising for the concert series and the actual public relations piece as one in the same. So let's talk a little bit about how we get the word out for the concert series here at our church. Each year during the summer, I develop a pamphlet that's mailed out to about 200 of our donors. Those folks get the mailer that has pictures and different write-ups about each concert and the date and time and where it will occur. Once they get this mailer, there's also an insert that asks them to donate, and it gives a little bit of a letter from me that talks about what a sponsorship does to support our concert series. They can then mail in that form with a check. They can also go online and use their credit card to donate to the concert series as well, and I try to outline all three of those ways of giving on the letter itself. Once all of those donors have mailed in their donation, I like to get back to them with a handwritten note. And I feel like that personal touch is really meaningful to our donors, and it lets them know that I personally value them and that they feel like they are an individual giving rather than a group of people who are just being recognized at our concerts. We also do recognize those folks in our programs at every concert, so their name is listed there unless they'd like it to be anonymous, but we do try to give them a lot of recognition and even some say in what happens in our concert series. We accept donations throughout the year, and we have an offering at most of our concerts. So that's another way that if folks haven't already given to the concert series, they're provided the opportunity to do so during our concerts themselves. Finally, we definitely advertise in our local newspaper and local media sources. And so what we try to do is reach our concert goers where they are, and many folks in our community still do read the newspaper, and so we do advertise many of our concerts there. We also do social media, but we find that not many people are looking on our Facebook page as much as they are our YouTube channel. And so what we're doing is this year we're creating videos that go along with each of our concerts. And I'll talk a little bit more about that when we get to the future section of this presentation. Whenever we look at ideas for the future, I'm thinking a lot about bringing in groups who we haven't had before. One example of that is hosting international groups, folks that many people in our area have never heard before. One example of that is bringing in Voces 8, a London-based choral ensemble who I'm sure many of you know, and so we'll be hosting them here in October. Another idea is doing collaborative concerts, concerts that allow folks to get on our stage and be with other people who they haven't made music with before. When we collaborate on stage, it gets more people on stage, which means more people in our audience. And I find that that really helps us in terms of fundraising, but it also helps us in terms of filling up the space itself with people from our community. Another idea is doing themed concerts. And I think that themed concert series are really helpful for people to group their mind and to sort of understand the idea of what each concert is, particularly if they haven't been to our concerts before. So I'm thinking about doing some sort of narrated concert for our Many Moods of Christmas concert this year, perhaps even using a children's story, and doing concerts that are outside of the box using mixed media, as I mentioned before. Other ideas include incorporating visual art and dance. We've done some dance at our church before, but I'd like to incorporate more of this in the future. I mentioned a minute ago about doing pre-concert talks, and I think what I'm going to do is incorporate interviews with people coming into town that are guest musicians and having them join us for a brief question and answer, and maybe even a live online session with some of our donors. And so that way folks get to know them before they actually arrive at our church and actually perform literature at our church. A final thing I'm trying to do a lot more of is using QR codes on our printed material, because I find that when people use QR codes to go online to websites, we're actually able to provide a host of really interesting media on websites that you can't do in printed media. Things like videos and high-definition photos, and a lot more descriptors than a person can fit on one page of paper. So I find that QR codes are sort of a new direction that I'm going in terms of our concert advertising. I see concert series throughout the United States as being a great outreach for our churches. And I hope that as we develop things after COVID and as we develop new ways to use technology, more people will be involved and interested and feel accessible to what we're doing in our churches. And so that community piece of what's going on in our houses of worship will allow us to reach out through a concert series. As we look at the original 4 questions that we asked at the beginning of this time, I want to think about how we can truly serve and make accessible our congregations to the entire communities in which we live. I think the more that we ask these questions of ourselves and of our churches, the more folks that will attend our concert series, and thus the more people that will attend our church services. If you have any questions or further discussion that you'd like to have, I would love to hear from all of you online. And I feel a bit disconnected because we are online for this conference, and so I would love to touch base with you and get to know you more. My contact information is on the screen. Please feel free to email me or friend me on Facebook at any time, and I would love to answer your questions, talk more about what you do in your congregations in terms of concert series, and to learn from you as well. I hope that this time has been meaningful, and certainly in our busy schedules at the end of a very long and very hot summer here in St. Petersburg, I hope that you are getting some rest and getting geared up for a new year in our church and a new concert series year throughout our communities. All the best from all of us here at First Presbyterian Church, St. Petersburg. Take care.